if Caitlin Clark and Iowa are able to get 2 more wins, Final Four national title, and they get their first championship, Caitlin Clark is the GOAT of women's college basketball. And it's really not even close. She is the GOAT if they get a championship this upcoming Sunday. Because what she would have are 3 things combined that no other women's college basketball player would have. She would have a national title. She has every scoring record you could basically possibly imagine. And the third thing that can't be overlooked and is very important is that she's elevated the sport of women's college basketball. There are players, a lot of players with more rings. Like if Caitlin Clark gets 1 ring, right? There are players with 2, with 3, with 4. There are women's players that are bigger winners. Some with more records than her, but not many. Not many records right now she hasn't broken. But nobody has the impact on the overall growth of the sport like she has. And I think when you add those 3 things together, a ring, records, and reach, I don't see how she's not the GOAT. And like to me, it's not even really close. I mean, just look at right now, Iowa's path to the national title. Look at last night. That was a massive game. All the buildup where you're going against the team in LSU, who obviously, prevented Caitlin Clark and Iowa from winning a championship last year. They are the reigning champs. A lot of people view the Tigers as the villains of women's college basketball. That was a massive Elite Eight matchup where either really Angel Reese's college career is most likely going to come to an end, or Clark's career is going to come to an end. And what did Caitlin Clark do last night? Made sure her season was still going. 41 points, 12 assists. She accounted, and you could argue maybe the second biggest game of her career behind only last year's national title game. She accounted for 67 of the 94 points the Hawkeyes scored. 71% of the points on the board either were scored by her or assisted by her. Set a tournament record, or tied, I should say, a tournament record with 9 threes made. She did it all last night. One of the biggest games of her career. She stepped up when her team needed her the most and almost single-handedly carried Iowa to the victory. And if they win 2 more games, they beat UConn, they beat most likely South Carolina. No disrespect to the other teammates on her teammates on the Hawkeyes, but this is a one-woman show. Right? She is the offense. She gets everyone else on Iowa going. And you rarely see now in team sports one person carry team, whether it's men's basketball, women's basketball, NBA even. It takes more than one player. But Caitlin is doing her best to make it a one-person show. So if you look at just the championship she would get, with how she performed against LSU in the Elite Eight, with all the weight on her shoulders, and then you look at the path now going forward where if she and Iowa win a championship, that means she would, and they just did, right, avenge the loss to LSU and knock out the reigning champs in the Elite Eight. Now in the Final Four, they got to get past the greatest women's college basketball coach of all time. You could argue the greatest college basketball coach of all time in Gino Auriemma. Got to get past him in the Final Four, and then waiting for you most likely in the national title game is South Carolina. Undefeated this year. And you look at the last 2 years, the Gamecocks have 1 loss the last 2 years. That was to Caitlin Clark and Iowa last year in the Final Four. They didn't lose a game before last year's Final Four. They haven't lost one since last year's Final Four. And so if we're talking about a run for Iowa and Caitlin Clark, where she knocks out the team that got them last year, the reigning champs in LSU, she helps to beat the greatest women's basketball coach, the greatest college basketball coach of all time in the Final Four, and then in the second year in a row takes down an undefeated South Carolina team. That is one of the most impressive championships we will ever have seen won. So you add that ring to her legacy, along with every single record she's broken. I mean, think about it. I'll run through really fast to the records right now she owns either in women's basketball or overall college basketball. She has the most points scored in college basketball history. Men or women does not matter. She owns the record. Most single season points in women's basketball history. Most three-pointers made in a career, men or women, does not matter. She owns the record. Most three-pointers made in a season. Most career assists in the NCAA tournament. Only Division I player ever to have consecutive 1,000-point seasons. Only player ever with 3 games of 40-plus points in the tournament. I mean, again, every single scoring record that is out there that could be broken, she has broken, either single season or career. She has it all. So if she and Iowa get 2 more wins, beat UConn, beat South Carolina, they get the national title. She has every record. And finally, why for me, the third piece of the puzzle here that would make her the GOAT, in my opinion, is the awareness, the reach she has brought to the sport of women's college basketball. We have never, I should say, talked about women's basketball ever the way we have the last, we'll say, 18 months. Since she really burst on the scene, we'll say midway through last year, and really just started scoring at an unbelievable clip. Women's basketball has been talked about on a national landscape more and more. More people are watching games. More people are talking about it. More people are following not just her, but other, big-time women's athletes on social media. I mean, think about it. Think about this show. It is a Tuesday, right, the week of the Final Four. Most years, I'll be honest with you, we're not talking women's Elite Eight. I've been working here at CBS Sports Radio since 2016 as a producer, host, whatever, in some capacity. This is the first time I can remember, first year, we'll say, because we've done this before on JR's show as well. First year I can remember where we're leading the show. The biggest story of the day is women's college basketball. That's in large part because Caitlin Clark's impact on the game, the awareness she has brought. The most watched game ever in women's basketball was last year, LSU Iowa national title game, almost 10 million viewers. The most watched non-Final Four women's basketball game this past tournament, 2 rounds ago, round of 32, Iowa, West Virginia. It's expected. There's a chance. Last night's game against LSU could set the record for the highest viewed women's college basketball game of all time. 9.9 right now is the record for last year's title game. There's a real opportunity and chance here. Last night's number could surpass that. More people than ever are watching the sport, talking about the sport, consuming the sport, in large part because of Caitlin Clark. Like, think about it, right? We've had other dominant players. We've had other dominant teams in women's basketball the last 25 years. But no one is talking about college basketball the way we are now back when UConn in the early 2000s with Diana Taurasi, Maya Moore, and when they were winning national titles, felt like every single year. We weren't talking about college basketball the way we are now when Baylor kind of took that baton, and under Kim Mulkey and Brittany Griner, they became a dominant force in the sport. And we haven't even talked about it in recent years when South Carolina kind of took that baton and they became the unbeatable team. We've had great players, Brianna Stewart, Brittany Griner. Like, we've had dominant women's basketball players before. We've had dominant teams where UConn's won over 100 games in a row. We have, though, not talked about the sport ever before the way we have in the last 18 months. And in large part, that is because of Caitlin Clark. Her impact on the growth of the sport cannot be overlooked. And that's why when you add the 3 up, the reach she's brought to the sport, the records she holds, and now if she wins a ring, gets 2 more wins, she is the GOAT. It's not even close. There have been better winners than her in the sense of players that have won multiple championships. But no one in the sport's great history has ever achieved all 3 things in their career. And that's why, for me, it's not a debate. You win a championship, Iowa gets a ring on Sunday. Caitlin Clark, for me, is the GOAT.